I never truly knew my mother, Lydia. She was always a distant figure in my life, a shadow that loomed large but never quite touched me. Growing up, I often found myself staring at her photograph, trying to decipher the woman behind the stern eyes and tight-lipped smile. I wondered what secrets she held, what dreams she had abandoned, and why she seemed so unreachable. Our relationship was a tapestry woven with threads of distance and misunderstanding. She was an enigma, a puzzle I could never solve. Each family heirloom, each piece of our shared history, felt like a clue to a mystery I was desperate to unravel. But the more I tried to understand her, the more elusive she became. Her heart was a locked chest I had no key to open. I remember finding an old, ornate box in the attic once, its lock rusted shut. It felt like a metaphor for our relationship, beautiful on the outside, but impossible to penetrate. I spent hours trying to open it, hoping it would reveal something, anything about her, but it remained stubbornly closed, just like her heart. Anger flickered in her eyes, a constant companion. It was as if she carried a storm within her, always on the verge of breaking. I often wondered what had caused such deep-seated rage. Was it something from her past? Or was it simply the weight of unfulfilled dreams and unspoken words? Whatever it was, it created a chasm between us that I could never bridge.
When Sarah sought answers from her father, she hoped for some clarity, some insight into the woman who had been such a mystery to her. But her father was a man of few words, and his silence spoke volumes. He deflected her questions with vague pronouncements and heavy silences. It was as if he too was afraid to confront the truth about Lydia. His avoidance only deepened Sarah's sense of isolation and confusion. Lydia's death was sudden, unexpected. It left Sarah with a whirlwind of emotions. She stood at the gravesite, feeling a mix of sorrow and relief. The woman who had been such a dominant yet distant presence in her life was gone, leaving behind a void that was both painful and liberating. It wasn't a tragedy for Sarah, not really. It was more of a hollow echo, a confirmation of the distance that had always existed between them. She felt a strange sense of detachment, as if she were mourning a stranger rather than her own mother. It was more of a hollow echo, a confirmation of the distance that had always existed between them. The sea, with its endless horizon, seemed to mirror the vast emotional gulf that had separated them. Sarah found herself lost in thought, wondering if she would ever truly understand the woman who had given her life. A confirmation of the distance that had always existed between them. Emptiness settled in my chest, a dull ache where grief should have been. I walked through the park, feeling the weight of unanswered questions and unresolved emotions. The solitude was both comforting and suffocating, a reminder of the loneliness that had always been a part of my relationship with my mother.
Emptiness settled in my chest, a dull ache where grief should have been. I sat on a park bench, staring blankly into the distance. The world moved on around me, but I felt stuck, trapped in a web of memories and regrets. I wondered if I would ever find closure, if I would ever be able to move past the shadow of my mother's presence, a dull ache where grief should have been. Then came the news of the inheritance, a bombshell disguised as a letter from a solicitor. It was the last thing I expected, a final twist in the tale of my mother's life. Then came the news of the inheritance, a bombshell disguised as a letter from a solicitor. I remember the moment vividly, the shock, the disbelief, the flood of questions that followed. Why had she left me a house? What was she trying to tell me from beyond the grave? A bombshell disguised as a letter from a solicitor. Lydia had left me a house I never knew existed. It felt like a final puzzle piece, a clue that might finally unlock the mystery of who she was. Lydia had left me a house I never knew existed. The letter described it in detail, a quaint cottage on the edge of a small town surrounded by dense forest. It sounded like something out of a fairy tale, a place of secrets and shadows. A house I never knew existed. I decided to visit it, hoping it would provide some answers. As I stood in front of the old weathered building, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. What secrets did it hold? What stories had its walls witnessed?
The house was in a small town on the fringes of a sprawling forest. It was a place of whispers and shadows, a secret Lydia had kept hidden from everyone. The townspeople spoke of it in hushed tones, as if it were a place of legend and mystery. It was a place of whispers and shadows, a secret Lydia had kept hidden from everyone. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as if it were guarding the secrets of the past. The path leading to the house was overgrown and barely visible, adding to the sense of mystery and intrigue. A secret Lydia had kept hidden from everyone. Curiosity warred with unease in Sarah's mind. She felt a strange connection to the place, as if it were calling to her, urging her to uncover its secrets. Curiosity warred with unease in Sarah's mind. Why would her mother leave her a house she never spoke of? What was she trying to communicate through this final, enigmatic gesture? The questions swirled in her mind, each one more perplexing than the last. Why would her mother leave her a house she never spoke of? What secrets did those old walls hold? Sarah felt a mix of excitement and trepidation as she prepared to explore the house, hoping it would finally provide the answers she had been seeking all her life. What secrets did those old walls hold? The house stood silent and imposing, a relic of the past waiting to reveal its stories. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped inside, ready to uncover the truth about her mother and perhaps herself. The house loomed before her, a gothic silhouette against the bruised sky. It stood like a sentinel, guarding secrets long forgotten, its presence both imposing and melancholic. The storm clouds gathered, casting an eerie glow over the ancient structure, as if nature itself was mourning the passage of time. Its windows were dark, vacant eyes staring out at the world. They seemed to follow her every move, whispering tales of the past. The glass, though cracked and dirty, held reflections of memories that once filled the rooms with laughter and life. The paint peeled from its walls like shedding skin, revealing the wood beneath. Each flake that fell told a story of neglect and abandonment, of years spent weathering the elements without care. The wood, though aged, still held the strength of the craftsmanship that built it. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay. It was a smell that spoke of forgotten gardens and untended grounds, where nature had reclaimed its territory. The leaves, wet and decomposing, crunched underfoot, adding to the symphony of desolation.
As I stepped out of the car, a shiver snaked down my spine. The chill in the air was more than just the cold. It was the weight of history pressing down on me. I could feel the eyes of the past watching, judging, waiting to see what I would do next. The lock on the front door was stiff, resistant to my touch. It was as if the house itself was reluctant to let me in to reveal its secrets. I struggled with it, feeling the rust and age under my fingers until it finally gave way with a reluctant click. When it finally yielded with a groan, the sound echoed through the house like a mournful sigh. It was a sound that spoke of loneliness and abandonment, of years spent in silence. The door swung open slowly, revealing the dim interior that awaited me.
Dust motes danced in the weak rays of sunlight that pierced the gloom. They floated lazily, undisturbed for years, creating a delicate ballet in the air. The light, though faint, brought a sense of life to the otherwise still and silent room. The air inside was stale, thick with the silence of ages. It was a silence that spoke louder than words, a silence that held the weight of countless stories and memories. The atmosphere was heavy, almost suffocating, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Sarah stepped inside, her footsteps echoing on the wooden floorboards. Each step she took seemed to reverberate through the house, breaking the long-held silence. The floorboards creaked under her weight, protesting the intrusion after years of solitude. The furniture was draped in white sheets, ghostly figures frozen in time. They stood like sentinels, guarding the memories of the past. The sheets, though dusty, were a stark contrast to the dark, decaying surroundings, adding an eerie sense of preservation. Cobwebs clung to the chandeliers, casting intricate patterns on the walls. They were like delicate lace, spun by the hands of time, adding to the house's sense of age and abandonment. The chandeliers, once grand and opulent, now hung like forgotten relics of a bygone era.
The house felt heavy, burdened by secrets. It was as if the very walls were whispering, sharing their tales of joy and sorrow, of life and death. The overgrown driveway and gnarled tree branches added to the sense of neglect, of a place forgotten by time. It was as though the very walls were watching me, their silence a palpable presence. I could feel the weight of their gaze, the judgment of the past. The bricks, though aged and weathered, still held the strength of the house's foundation, a testament to its enduring legacy. Their silence a palpable presence. It was a silence that spoke of years gone by, of lives lived and lost. The empty rooms and hallways were like echoes of the past, each one holding a piece of the house's history. I wandered from room to room, each one a testament to a life I never knew. The house was a labyrinth of memories, each corner holding a story waiting to be discovered. As I explored, I felt a connection to the past, a sense of belonging to a place that had once been filled with life and love.
The first few days passed in a blur of unpacking and exploring. Sarah had moved into the old mansion with a sense of excitement and trepidation. Each room she entered seemed to hold a story, a whisper of the past that lingered in the air. The attic, filled with dusty old trunks and forgotten memories, was particularly intriguing. She spent hours sifting through old photographs and letters, trying to piece together the history of the house. The silence was ever present, broken only by the creaking of floorboards and the rustling of leaves against the windows. It was a silence that seemed to have a weight of its own, pressing down on her shoulders and making her hyper-aware of every little sound. The house seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something to happen.
I found myself talking aloud just to break the oppressive quiet. It was as if my own voice was the only thing keeping the silence at bay. I would narrate my actions, comment on the weather, anything to fill the void. But even my own voice sounded strange and hollow in the vast, empty rooms. I slept fitfully, plagued by strange dreams. In these dreams, I was not alone in the house. Shadows moved in the corners of my vision, and whispers echoed through the halls. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, convinced that someone or something had been watching me. In my dreams, the house breathed, its walls pulsing with a life of their own. It was as if the very structure of the mansion was alive, watching and waiting. The wallpaper seemed to ripple, and the floorboards creaked in a rhythm that mimicked breathing. It was both fascinating and terrifying.
One evening, as Sarah sat by the fireplace, a log shifted in the grate. She had been trying to read, but her eyes kept drifting to the dancing flames. The warmth of the fire was comforting, a small beacon of light in the otherwise dark and cold house. Sparks flew up the chimney, momentarily illuminating the room. In that brief flash of light, the shadows seemed to retreat, only to come rushing back as the sparks faded. It was in that fleeting instant that Sarah could have sworn she saw a figure standing in the shadows. In that fleeting instant, Sarah could have sworn she saw a figure standing in the shadows. It was tall and slender, its features obscured by the darkness. She blinked, and the figure was gone, leaving her to wonder if her mind was playing tricks on her. It was tall and slender, its features obscured by the darkness. The image lingered in her mind, a haunting silhouette that seemed to follow her even when she closed her eyes. She tried to shake it off, telling herself it was just a trick of the light.
Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. I dismissed it as a trick of the light, but a seed of unease had been planted in my mind. Every shadow seemed to take on a more sinister shape, and every creak of the house made me jump. I dismissed it as a trick of the light, but a seed of unease had been planted in my mind. The house no longer felt like a refuge, it felt like a trap. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the house itself was aware of my presence.
The house was starting to get to her, she realized. Its silence was no longer merely oppressive, it was expectant, as though something was waiting for her to let her guard down. The once charming quirks of the old mansion now seemed like ominous signs. Its silence was no longer merely oppressive. It was expectant, as though something was waiting for her to let her guard down. The air seemed to hum with anticipation, and the shadows seemed to grow longer and darker with each passing day. It was expectant, as though something was waiting for her to let her guard down. Sarah knew she had to stay vigilant, but the constant tension was wearing her down. She couldn't shake the feeling that the house was alive, watching her every move, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal its secrets. On the third night, an itch started on Sarah's wrist. It was a small thing, easily ignored at first, but it persisted, growing in intensity and becoming unbearable. Soon, her entire body felt as though it were crawling with insects.
When I looked in the mirror, I gasped in horror. My skin was flaking, peeling away in thin, translucent strips. My reflection stared back at me, a stranger with haunted eyes.
Panic welled up inside her. This wasn't normal. This was something else, something sinister and terrifying. She tried to call for help, but the phone line was dead. She ran to the front door, but it wouldn't budge. It was as though the house had trapped her, its grip tightening with each passing moment.
My reflection in the mirror was changing. My hair, once a vibrant auburn, was darkening, growing longer by the second. My nails lengthened, sharpening into claws.
Terror lent speed to her steps as she stumbled back from the mirror, her heart pounding against her ribs. The house was alive, she realized, and it was feeding on her fear.